You know that feeling you get when you finally get something you really, really wanted? A trophy, a graduation, a promotion, that big trip you've been looking forward to for months. When you finally get there, it's everything you imagined, sunshine and rainbows. And then a little time passes and the excitement fades. For me, it was Disney World. I was so excited to go. When I got there, it was exactly as I imagined. It was magical. It was beautiful. It brought me right back to being a kid. I loved it. And then reality kind of started kicking in. It was expensive. You walk everywhere. The food isn't as good as you think. The lines are brutal unless you pay extra. And the Florida heat, wow, there's no shade anywhere. I was happy, but was it really what I was expecting? Did it fill that thing I was hoping it would fill? Not really. Now, I still love Disney. That's not the point. The point is, why does this keep happening? Why is it that once we finally have what we really wanted, we just move on to wanting the next thing? The cycle repeats over and over and nothing ever fully ends up the way we thought it would. That feeling is worth taking seriously because it might be the most important clue about who you are. Now, before we go any further, if you watched the very first episode, episode 0, I gave you a challenge at the end. I asked you to write down what you actually believe about God right now and why. If you did that, great. Hold on to it. We're going to come back to it at the very end of the series. And I think you'll be surprised at what you find when you compare it to where you are then. If you didn't, no problem, but keep the question in the back of your mind as we go. What do I actually believe and why? Today, I want to introduce what I'm going to call the 4 big questions. These aren't questions I came up with. These are questions that human beings have been asking since the very beginning of written history. Across every culture, every civilization, every era, and they matter because these are the questions this entire series is going to try to answer. And here they are. Question number 1. Why is there something rather than nothing? Just because the universe exists doesn't mean it had to. Reality could have been completely different. The universe as we know it might have never existed at all. Have you ever actually thought about that? Science does an extraordinary job of explaining how the universe works, how stars form, how species evolve, how matter behaves, but science can't tell you why any of it's here in the first place. Why is there a universe at all? Why are you here? That's not a scientific question. It's a deeper one. The second question is, why does anything mean anything? If the universe were purely physical, just matter and energy following rules, then meaning would have no place in it. Stars would form and die, species would evolve and go extinct, civilizations would rise and fall, and none of it would mean anything because meaning isn't a physical thing you can measure. But is that how you actually live? Do you really believe your life is meaningless? That your relationship with the people you love are just chemical reactions with no significance? I doubt it, and that's interesting. Because you can't weigh meaning, you can't photograph it, you can't put it in a lab, and yet it feels more real than almost anything else. Why? Question 3, why does injustice feel objectively wrong? Here's what I mean by objectively wrong. Not just something you personally dislike, but something that feels wrong regardless of what anyone else thinks, regardless of what your culture says, regardless of any argument anybody could make. Think about it this way. If you heard that an adult deliberately hurt a child for fun, you would be disgusted. And there would be no argument in the world that would change that. Even if somebody tried to convince you that it was fine, something you knew would know that it was wrong. But here's what's strange. We're all wired that way. Across every culture in history, certain things have registered as genuinely deeply wrong. Not just inconvenient or unpopular, but actually wrong. Where does that conviction come from? If morality is just a matter of opinion, why does it never feel that way in the moments that matter most? And question 4, is death really the end? There is no question more unavoidable than this one. Every civilization in history, completely independent of each other, has wrestled with it because we all know we're going to die. And we are, as far as we know, the only creatures on earth who understand that about ourselves. And yet no one knows what happens next. Not the most educated person in the world, not the greatest scientist. Something that every single human being will experience is a total mystery to us. Doesn't that strike you as strange? Now, these questions are not new, and some people believe that once science advances far enough, we'll finally get all the answers. But what if the answers already exist, and we've just been looking for them in the wrong place? C.S. Lewis was a brilliant thinker who spent much of his life as an atheist before eventually becoming one of the most well-known Christian writers in history. And he made an observation that I think is worth thinking about. He said, "No creature is born with a desire for something that doesn't exist." Think about it. A newborn gets hungry and food exists. A person gets thirsty and water exists. Ducks are born wanting to swim and swimming is a real thing. They weren't born wanting something that has no corresponding reality. Human beings across every culture and every era are born with desires that nothing in this world ever fully satisfies. The longing for something more, the sense that there has to be something beyond the cycle of wanting and getting and being disappointed. Lewis put it this way: if I find in myself a desire which no experience in the world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Now, he's not saying the world is bad. He's saying that if the longing keeps pointing beyond this world, maybe that's not a malfunction, maybe that's a clue. Now, these 4 questions are the backbone of everything that we're going to cover. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does anything mean anything? Why does injustice feel objectively wrong? And is death really the end? This whole series is an attempt to answer them honestly without skipping the hard parts. So in the next episode, we're not starting with the Bible, we're not going to start with Jesus or the church or anything you'd expect from a religious series. We're going to look at what modern physics actually tells us about how everything began and ask whether any of it gives us a reason to believe that God exists. Episode 2 is called Does God Exist? The Universe Shouldn't Be Here. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps other people find the series. Subscribe if you want to follow along, and if you know someone who's been carrying these questions around, share this with them. These are the kinds of conversations that are better when you don't have them alone. I'll see you in the next one.